Empire space. In case you haven't noticed, this is such a wonderful space to work and just be in and come to fun events at. So thank you.
Oh yes, and if you didn't notice, she is expecting her first child.
So all of my work that's fit to read is way too long for a 15-minute, 10-minute time slot. So like Julie said, I'm reading half of a short story. If it's just too much of a cliffhanger for you, you can just go online to theledgemagazine.com. It's out this month, and there are many works in here. There are probably like 15 stories and twice that many poems, and it's very good reading. So that's what you can do when we get to the end of our time together. This is called Scary Monster in the Dark. I keep having the same dream. I'm at the altar with Claude Kalai, the Hungarian kid who moved away in 4th grade after none of us would help him when he said he'd been molested. We're waiting. My mother's in the front pew. My father never shows. I want to tell Claude, let's forget it, but I don't have the nerve. He's been waiting so long. His whole body shakes. His skin is wrinkled, and he looks rabid. I know the only way to wake up is to kick and scream in my bed in real life until the whole scene vanishes. Then I'm alone, in a sweat, under the covers in my dorm room. I know why I still dream about Claude. It's because of his letters. I never thought he'd keep in touch, but those stuffed yellow envelopes keep showing up in the campus mailbox, thanks to my mother. My mother always said he liked me. She has a fantasy of me marrying someone foreign, which is why she still forwards his mail. In the same envelope, she tucks magazine ads featuring slinky women in the latest fashions and wedding announcements of girls I once knew. It's annoying, but I don't have the heart to tell her to stop. Lately, I just let the envelopes pile up in the mailroom, hoping they get shipped to a dead letter office. I imagine a big incinerator and those letters addressed to me being tossed in, one by one, to their silent cremation. If only I'd told off Claude back in 4th grade. That day at school, we gathered around to watch the space shuttle launch on television. It was the first space shuttle ever, the world's first reusable spacecraft. We were supposed to be impressed with the recycling, but all I could think of were the trash heaps that piled up when Mom didn't feel well. I got home that day to see a rectangular picture of the Empire State Building prominently displayed on our kitchen table. It had my name on the back, along with pasted-on, cut-up letters from different magazines spelling, "Remember?" The magazine letters glittered in the light. Then my stomach tightened once my brain fixed on the sender. I took it behind the garage and burned it, but my mother had already seen it. With her eerie sense of clairvoyance, she already had something to say about it. "You're going to leave that poor boy hanging," she would say. She always said the same thing, and it was hard not to picture Claude dangling from a noose tied to a tree in the woods. Whenever there was a letter, my mother made sure to hand it to me directly. "Mail call," she would say. Sometimes it was the only thing she said to me all week. And if she didn't see a return letter on the table, she had ways of bending me to her will. She would crumble at disobedience, be laid up in bed for 2 weeks at any evidence of her having been a bad mother. During these episodes, I'd invite myself to friends' houses for dinner. It became easy to charm other families, slicing steak and telling jokes, while diverting questions about my mom's job that kept her working so late. When I got home, Mom would still be in bed, and I'd bring her tea, whatever the hour. I got used to the drill. She'd stay in bed, and life would be flat for a while, until something small jarred her out of her funk. Something like a letter. "I'm not going to ask what's in there, Polly," my mother said once about a letter I hadn't touched for a week. I was in 8th grade and had just cut off all my hair. She was painfully stirring a batch of peanut butter cookie dough, still in her robe, her own hair matted. But I am going to ask that a letter go back to that young man by next Saturday, she whispered. I knew that if I did what she asked, the refrigerator would be full again. My mother liked that Claude was a boy and so persistent. I also think she liked the idea of befriending the foreign family after the tragedy. She had read the testimonies in the papers, but never said whether or not she believed Claude. That was her way. People were supposed to be discreet. People shouldn't pry into other people's business. Everyone has their burden, she was fond of saying whenever the conversation got too personal. She lived by these rules. For example, she never said more about my dad than, "He left one day when you were 2. She was silent about his checks that came in the mail, and so was I. She also never asked how I was doing at school, though I knew my grades had to be high. She didn't let other kids call her by her first name, nor did she befriend Mr. E like so many parents and students. She believed teachers were supposed to teach the kids, not make friends with them, which I guess was true, but Mr. E, everyone believed, was an exception. According to babysitters, older brothers, and Will, the kid next door, Mr. E wasn't just a teacher, he was a hero. Tales abounded about how Mr. E's 4th grade was the one place kids could learn and run amok at the same time. His classroom, rigged with quadraphonic speakers, a jukebox, a shag rug, and as many games as you could think of, matched our dreams of the day when, for some tragic reason, all the adults disappeared. By the time I was 9, I longed to witness his playful magic and legendary tickle tortures firsthand. One night I told Mom how badly I wanted him for a teacher. She was in bed with the breakfast tray balanced on her lap. The laughter from the sitcom filled the room. At first her vacant stare didn't waver. Then a strange sound rose over the laugh track. It was something between a moan and a wail. The tray went flying and tea spilled onto the rug. Over the wails, I told her not to worry. I could get the tea out of the rug. It was really no problem. That day, Will, my next-door neighbor, had bragged about going on a nighttime field trip to a Yankee game with Mr. E. I watched out of my bedroom window as the moon rose and the green Nova pulled up slowly to the curb. Will ran down the front walk faster than I'd ever seen him run, his Yankee hat on backwards. I stared at Mr. E in the front seat of the car. He wore a forward-facing Yankee hat and a satisfied grin as the kids in the back opened the door and Will dove in on top of them, the last leaf in a pile. I would have gotten close to Mr. E that year if it wasn't for Claude Kilai, with his cabbagey scent and weird Martian voice, always looking for attention. Claude's mom was dead, and his dad was about 80 years old. Their ochre-colored house 2 blocks away always smelled like stew. My mother sent me over to play with him one afternoon. She'd met his dad after church around Christmas time. They had only lived in our town for 2 months. He was loading into his car some Tinker toys donated by kids who didn't want them anymore. He told her in a soft voice that Claude would really like it a little better if he had some friends. Mom sent me over there the next afternoon, and Claude was waiting on the front steps for me. It was a beautiful winter day, but Claude took me inside into the living room, where we sat at a black table covered on one side with old books in another language, probably Hungarian. The only games to play were puzzles made of wood and the Tinker toys. The puzzles had belonged to Claude's dad when he was a little boy in Hungary. Just looking at the scenes on the boxes, villages full of people dressed in colorful drapey clothing, hunters in a forest, made me instantly sad, like I was starving and would never be fed something I recognized while at Claude's house. Claude dumped the puzzle pieces onto the table and picked one up listlessly. I started collecting all the pieces with red on them. "That's cheating," Claude said, once he noticed my strategy. "Why?" I asked. "Because," he mimicked his dad's pronunciation of every vowel, "you have to see what shape fits where, not what color."